Our 12 Powers topic for today is understanding. So that's what we've been working on this month. It's the ability to comprehend and interpret knowledge, to make cognitive connections, to realize and receive insight. And it also carries with it that flavor of the ability to be compassionate with one another, because we need to understand each other to do that. So today my topic is understanding attraction, which is like the law of attraction, and I've put a subtitle on it. It's the principle of the thing. Because what we see as the law of attraction quite often is really surface. What people teach out in the world, it's really in pop culture nowadays, right? This idea of the law of attraction. And it's very surface. It's just, well, if you're positive things will come to you. But it doesn't really deepen into the full meaning of what the law of attraction is. And so what I want to do is I want to bring a little understanding to that. And so firstly, I want to remind you of a quote that I had last week, because it kind of feeds into this. So our every thought, feeling, and word sets up a response from the universe, but we have only a glimmer of understanding how to create our experience deliberately. And so I wanted to kind of piggyback on that idea, because we can't create that best life for ourselves until we really understand what the principles are behind it. We have to really deepen into those principles. And that's why we do these 12 Powers themes, because we try to work with each of these 12 powers so that we know how we can use them in our lives in order to create good in our lives and in the world around us. And especially as conscious people moving out into the world to help create a better world, we need to be in awareness of how these principles work. So, I love this quote by Eric Butterworth. He wrote, "Now you may say, where does God come in then? Well, God doesn't come in. God never went out. God is spirit, present in its entirety at every point in space at the same time." So what is God? And this is the part where it gets a little bit challenging for some people, because that's not God. But yet we have this in the back of our minds, right? When in our culture, in our world, we are so used to the understanding of God as being the divine white guy on a cloud someplace, father figure, maybe grandpa figure, I don't know, who's like poking at people on the earth. This is from the Sistine Chapel. This is the creation of Adam, I think is the title of this. And so we have this in the back of our minds. What is God? Well, God is the white dude on the cloud, who judges us and who sometimes gives us what we want and sometimes doesn't when we pray. And these are the popular ideas in our culture. And I'm simplifying it a little bit, but really what we come to know in unity, in New Thought teachings, is that God is principle. That God isn't an entity or a being apart from us, that God is the principle that we use in our lives to create with, that we create, that we are the creators that bring things to life in our experience. And we do that by means of these 12 powers that we have. And there are probably more powers, but what Charles Fillmore talked about were these 12 ones, because he had a framework for them that worked really well. But I know there are other teachers out there who say, well, there's also the power of maybe benevolence, or that there's other types of things that we can bring to bear, spiritual principles that we can bring to bear. And actually, I'd like to reframe the word power to be spiritual principle or divine idea. That these are the divine ideas that are contained in every one of us. We are each that. We are each using that in every day in our lives. So it's not the white dude on a cloud. And likewise, the law of attraction isn't what we've thought of it either. It's not that surface idea that we've thought of it either. So let's deepen into this a little bit. So our verse that I found for today was, I took it from the Berean Literal Bible because I like the way they framed it. And it's, as we have come to know and have come to believe the love that God has as to us. God is love, and the one abiding in love abides in God, and God abides in him. And then from Charles Fillmore, love in divine mind is the idea of universal unity. In expression, love is the power that joins and binds in divine harmony the universe and everything in it. Charles Fillmore has written in one of his books, Jesus Christ Heals. He wrote, God is not love. He wrote, God is not loving. God is love. God is the principle of love that we use. We experience the love when we allow it to be through us, when we allow ourselves to use that principle. And I can actually give you I should probably do that, read it actually, so that you can hear the whole thing. God is not loving. God is love, the great heart of the universe and of man, from which is drawn forth all feeling, sympathy, emotion, and all that goes to make up the joys of existence. God is not loving. God is love. And we partake of that. We use that as a principle. So what does that look like, though? You know, that principle of love, which incidentally goes along really well with the principle of understanding, which is why I'm bringing it into this week. Because in order to love something, you need to place your focus on it, and to place your focus on it, you are in the process of understanding it. And so understanding and love go together really well. Love is attraction, it is harmony, it is desire, it is unification with, it's an affinity. And what Reverend Paul Hasselbeck in the book Power Up says that what love is it's not that we are attracting things to us like a magnet attracts, but we are attracting ourselves to the things that we choose to attract ourselves to, where we place our focus. And what he means by that is that when we place our focus on something, we place our intention on it, we place our energy on it, we place our ideas towards it, that what we're really doing is we're putting ourselves in an affinity with it, in a resonance with it, in a harmony with it. And because we're resonating with that thing, our energies are lining up with that thing. It rises up in our lives, it grows in our life, it becomes part of our experience in a greater way. So this is what love is. Love is that attracting force. And that's why it brings people together. When I love people, people are more bound to be in my life. I'm more bound to be seeing the people that are there, seeing them deeply, understanding them deeply. When I place that focus into my surroundings, into my home, then I am more likely to create a more beautiful home, a more pleasing environment, a more comfortable place for me to rest my head at the end of the day. This is how we attract with love. The thing is, love is a principle. So like any principle, it doesn't care whether what you love is good for you or not. Love is a principle. It doesn't care whether you place your focus on something that is going to be harmful to you or not. And in fact, what Power Up says is that when you place your focus on something, even if it's something that you don't want, for instance, worry, You place all that energy and focus on worry, that in fact what you're doing is you're drawing yourself into the situation that will increase your worry. And you're using the power of love, because what in fact you're doing is in that moment you are loving what you are worried about. It doesn't feel like it. May not feel good the way you think love should feel. But that's in fact what we're doing, because we are energetic, conscious beings. We partake of the divine principle of love, and therefore when we use that divine principle of love, we can use it for our good or we can use it for our bad. However we choose to define that. And so all of this is always unfolding within us. We're never apart from that principle of love. We're never apart from the principle of understanding. We're never apart from the principle of choice and will. These are all the bits and pieces of the divine that are actually not bits and pieces in silos. And I have a interesting thought about how we teach these, because we teach them month by month by month. This is the month of understanding, so all we're going to talk about is understanding. But really, it's not one thing. It's a continuum. It's a blend of all 12, all the time, and we're using all 12 powers and more all the time. We're using all of the spiritual principles that are contained within the overarching divine principle that we call God. We're using them all the time. So when we are using them, we have to ask ourselves, am I using it skillfully? If I'm seeing things in my awareness that don't feel good to me, chances are I'm not using those principles skillfully or consciously. Let me give you some examples of how that might look. So if I'm not using understanding in a conscious way, if I'm using it in a conscious way, I have that ability to be compassionate. That's one of the things I mentioned earlier on. If I'm not using it skillfully, if I'm using it unconsciously, well, it might be obsession, or it might be self-absorption. I might be so trying to figure things out that I'm stuck in the figuring out of things and never in the doing of things. You know anybody that does that? That they decide they want to buy something, and they research for years about that something before, and they never actually make the decision to buy the something or to get the something or do the something because they're too much in the research. That's an unskillful use of understanding. We all do that. And then love. What does love look like? Well, when love is conscious, of course, it's the ability to create harmony. It's the ability to create connection and harmony, and again, to be in that compassion for others. When love is not used skillfully, when it's used unconsciously, it can also look like obsession. It can look like a stalker. Or it can look like apathy, like I care for nothing, I care for no one. And again, it can sort of look like self-absorption, can it? I only care for me. So this is why you see how there's these connecting points between understanding and love, where they have overlap in them, as do all of the powers. There's little overlapping pieces all the way through. So they work really well together when we are working with them consciously. They work really well together because when we are in that place of understanding, we're more likely to use the principle of love to focus and harmonize with something. And when we're in that place of using love consciously and skillfully, then we're more apt to take the time to understand what it is that we are placing our love and focus on. Okay, so I want to tell you a story. Actually, first I'm going to do a couple of these. Charles Fillmore says we connect our soul forces with whatever we center our love upon. If we love the things of senses or material, we are joined or attached to them through a fixed law of being. our soul forces. This is the attracting force of love. And I'll also do this one, I think. This is that Paul Hasselbeck from Power Up, and what he writes is that because of the attracting force, the attracting aspect of love, this power can also be viewed as the ability to focus or intend. What we desire or want, we tend to focus upon. What we desire, we intend to have. It's said that what we focus on increases. While it may seem strange, it is true that when we focus on the negative, we actually love the negative in the moment. Love and focus are intertwined. So I wanted to find a story that would illustrate this. And I found, or I recall this story from Hinduism. It's from the Bhagavad Gita, and it is about Krishna, who is one of the most beloved gods of India, the Hindu faith. And it's a story about when Krishna was a child. He was out playing on the side of a river with his friends, and the ball that they were playing with went into the river. And so Krishna dove into the river to get the ball. But in the river, there was this sea monster, sea serpent. And it saw Krishna, and it grabbed him, and it started to pull him down. Now, I'm going to stop there before I tell you a little bit more, because let's think about this. So he was with his friends. That's an expression of love, expression of connection. He was with his friends on the shoreline playing, expressing his joy. He was beside a river, and a river oftentimes, metaphysically speaking, talks about emotion and talks about our physicality and our emotions. And then there was a serpent who is, or sea serpent, who is like metaphysically speaking, that would be the aspect of fear. And this fear starts to pull him down. The serpent starts to pull him down. And Krishna is flailing in the water, and he's drowning. He's going to die. He's drowning. Because he succumbed to the fear. He allowed the fear to be his focus in that moment. He took his power of love and allowed it to be focused on the fear. But then what happened was his friends on the shoreline saw what was going on, and they called out to him, "Krishna, remember, you're a god. Remember, Krishna, you're a god." So that is our conscious use of love, reminding us who we are, our conscious use of love, attracting us to our higher self, our power. And so he remembered who he was, and he rose up out of the water, and he banished the serpent, banished the fear from his mind, and was able to come back to the shore and continue his game with his friends. This is what we do in our lives, is it not? We attract to ourselves those fearful situations when we allow ourselves to worry, when we allow ourselves to be pulled down into the river by our fears, by our negative feelings, or our hurts, our angers, our fears, our worries. We allow ourselves to be pulled down into the river. But if we can only remember that we are gods, that we are gods, we are using the divine through us, as us. We have all of that principle in every single cell of our body. There isn't one place within us that does not have use of the divine light of love, that attracting power of our good, that power of bringing ourselves into harmony with, into affinity with, into resonance with our good. And so if we can simply remember who we are and remember how to use consciously this divine idea of love, this principle of love within us, then we can rise up over the circumstances, whatever they are. We can banish the fears and be in our higher life that we choose. So let's move on to our affirmation for that. Oh, there we go. So join with me if you choose. I use the divine principle of understanding to focus and harmonize my consciousness with the good that I choose to experience in my life. Thank you, and so it is. May life bless you abundantly. May grace and goodness walk with you every day. May love expand within you. May love and joy expand within you, and may you know peace. Go in peace and shine your light.